know that we will be recording this, and so we will be sending it out, a recording of this, after the presentation is done, sometime in the next day or two. So if you don't get any questions answered or anything like that, you're going to be welcome to review the recording again and send us the questions, any questions that we don't get to afterwards via email. All right. Okay, the waiting room slowed down a little bit. Looks like people have joined. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just give me one moment. And we'll get started. Oh, still got people in the waiting room. Okay. All right, so welcome to this presentation by MBA and Beyond, to our coffee chat. We're obviously getting started now. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat box. I will be getting to them. I also have a few team members that are going to be helping by supplying articles, resources, or just quick answers to certain questions that can be answered more easily. I'm Elena. I'm a profile evaluator with MBA and Beyond, and I'm super happy to be here with you all talking about this. It actually is morning where I am, so this coffee chat is a good time for me, but I know you're all from all over the world. So again, we're going to be respectful of time because for some of you it's very late at night. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Also, we will do a live Q&A at the end. So again, if you do have questions, put them in the chat box. We will be checking them. Any that we don't get to during the presentation, we're going to try to answer them afterwards. And then, of course, you're always welcome to email us and send us those questions. Oh, someone's, I think, on the screen accidentally. I don't know who Roger is, but I think they're accidentally drawing on the screen a little bit. It's okay. We'll move forward. All right, so with MBA and Beyond, we will be selecting a few candidates each cycle to work with us. We do keep a limited roster of the number of applicants that work with us, that work with our consultants, because we want to make sure to give each of them dedicated, unlimited time to achieve their MBA goals. And so after this presentation, if you would like to send us answers to these questions by November 20th, you will receive an email with these questions, but it's which 3 schools and rounds are you applying to and why? And what do you think are your USPs, your differentiators for these business schools? And so we would love to learn, again, a little bit more about your goals, your profiles. And then the top 3 candidates with the strongest profiles will receive up to 20% off on full packages. So again, I'll revisit this at the end of the presentation, but it's just something to be thinking about during the presentation. Okay, so for the agenda, these are the various things we're going to be going through. We're going to be talking about overrepresented versus non-traditional backgrounds, planning, building unique MBA applications, MBA rankings, which I know is a big topic always, shortlisting best fit schools, and what happens if you have a lower GMAT or GRE score, or it's not been attempted yet, how to plan and strategize for all of these things. And I'd like to introduce our speakers. So Guillermo, he's a Columbia Business School candidate, has worked with McKinsey as a business analyst for 2 years. He's going to go back into consulting. I know consulting is a very popular pathway for a lot of MBA candidates. So I'm excited to have someone with that experience here. And then he really has a passion for MBA prep, for admissions prep, and the strategy, basically the comprehensive process and how it all kind of comes together and helps create, again, goals in the journey for both the MBA admissions and post-MBA admission goals, because we all are going to take a journey after the MBA, and he's really passionate about the whole process. And so our other speaker is Pranav, and he is an INSEAD MBA candidate. So prior to his MBA, he was a technology consultant for 5 years. He will be joining a consulting practice in Germany. So again, Pranav, very global candidate, very global consultant. He's been mentoring candidates for over 2 years, has helped people gain entry into selective MBA programs. And he very much personalizes the approach when working with the candidate and is very intentional about the story that candidates present to the admissions committee. So Guillermo, Pranav, thank you so much for being the consultants here today, being willing to share your knowledge and this information with potential MBA candidates. So we very much appreciate you. And I will let you guys take it from here because they want to hear you.
Okay. So I'll go. Thank you, Elena, first of all, for your amazing presentations, and well, welcome all. It's good morning as well for me. It's good morning for me, but I'm guessing good afternoon, good night, good evening all over the world. So just like thank you all for being here. So yeah, we have quite an agenda today. So let's go for it. I'll be taking the first half, and then Pranav will take in the second half. But you know, Pranav might be chipping in some parts because you know he has more other experiences than I have, and he can always enrich what I'm saying. So let's go with the first one. So when we're talking about the applications round 2, basically where we are right now, we are almost in November. So I'm thinking that most of you will be thinking on round 2. So we have to at least think of frame those applications not like the round 1, which are just normally from June sometimes until September. The round 2 normally are due in January. At least some schools like Columbia are even a bit later, but let's just forget about those outliers. So basically, when you are talking about round 2, you need to know the environment. When we talk about knowing the environment, is you need to know that a lot of the class of the MBA that you are applying for are already in. So basically, you need to think on their context. Basically, you have as round 2 applicants a bit more months of preparation. So the thing is that what schools are expecting normally from round 2 applicants is that they are a bit more prepared in terms of knowing the schools and having more information, having spoken with more people, and that's kind of the thing. So basically, that's a bit of the hurdle or the fight when you get to round 2, and also round 2 has more applicants and as well less normally less acceptance rates. So you need to be more careful. You need to be really mindful of what you're doing, and also super attention to detail. That I think that's always in round 2 and round 1, but in round 2 especially, as we're mentioning, because of this, you know, lower acceptance rates, more people are already in, and you might be fighting, let's say, quoting, fighting against people that are not also applying as you, but are also already in. Okay, and then what we are mentioning, what I mentioned already, you know, the sweat equity is now even more important because as you had more months to prepare, schools are going to expect you to have more information and be more prepared. So attending to school admission events, reach to current students, or even visited campus, that are kind of the things that on round 2 might help you to get a better application or a more prepared application than in round 1 versus the round 1 applications, which are a bit more general because the class is still 100% open. So I think that's basically these round 2 applications. Overall, the bottom line on here is, as I mentioning, less space for people, so kind of less acceptance rates, probably more people applying, and then you've had more time, so schools expect you to be more prepared. Basically, those are like the 3 main things that you can expect from a round 2 application. So yeah, Elena, if we can go to the next one. Okay, so I think that we are a bit of the order, yeah. So let's get you Pranav doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Guillermo. Thanks, Elena, for that introduction as well. So what I'll be taking here is essentially the first resource. I think is something we all come across, which are the MBA rankings. I think that's at least how I started, by just hitting a Google search as to the best MBA colleges I could make my way to. So starting right there is the first question is, why are MBA rankings inconsistent? Why is there as much variation across the various publication and outlets? So two key factors really play into this. One is the parameters that are considered, really, because each outlet or each publication has an identity of its own and utilizes parameters that are best associated with that identity. So if you look at Forbes, it exclusively focuses on return on investment, on essentially your first year salary versus your investment into the MBA. Whereas FT, which is Financial Times, has a slew of parameters, 9 totally, across different weights, which factor into what will be the ranking of a certain college. Second is the extent and weightage. Like I said, there are several factors that play into these rankings. If you look at compensation as a parameter, it's about 40% for Financial Times, and US News Report and World Report is about 14. And these two are the primary factors that play into the inconsistency or variation rather. Which brings to the second point: if they're so inconsistent, do they really matter? In fact, they do. So the first and I think the major benefit comes through access to scholarships and visas. So if I look at scholarships, a lot of external scholarships especially are linked to getting into a certain section or rather a certain tier of schools. And these tier of schools actually feature on these rankings, or rather these rankings are utilized as feeders for these lists. Same goes with visas. If you would have paid attention in the last few years, the UK has something called as the Genius Visa, essentially listing out 50 universities globally, which students from where are allowed a work visa or a job search visa for 2 years in the UK. And it in fact even specifically mentions that the school will need to feature in 2 out of 3 or 4 lists. And finally is the loans. So especially in developing countries, loans to the education loan rather comes at attractive interest rates for such schools. So that's definitely a benefit. When it comes to optics, essentially at times a college would have not done its branding as well in different geographies. So essentially, if you attend college in another geography and come back to your home native, etc., it's usually a great reference point when you highlight your college as to highlighting what's the kind of standing that college does have in the global community. Coming to which list do you finally refer to? I think that's a key question. Understand what is important to you. The parameters that play into these rankings are very clear. They're outlined very clearly across these publication outlets. They will, of course, not contain all your parameters, but which ones do appeal to you the most, utilize them, and then figure which is the best college that works for you. Next is create your own list. I think that's the most important thing. Understand, like I said, what are your preferences or motivations rather, and work towards creating a list, starting with your dream schools and working your way to the safe bets. Elena, if you could make your way to the next slide. Yeah, so now coming to the next piece is a key question again, which people right from the get-go have. What do we do if we have a low GMAT or if we haven't attempted it yet? I think the first point is to understand what could be a potential GMAT score. I think because that's such an important criteria for colleges, it usually tends to be non-negotiable. So you at least need to know a range, right? What's the minimum possible for you or what you could go up to. So essentially, if you've not taken it, I would suggest you take a mock. These mocks are freely available. So you can just download them from mba.com and potentially get a couple of mocks free and figure exactly where you stand. In terms of identifying then potential improvements and timelines, you could achieve your potential GMAT score. I would suggest you work with someone or rather look up resources online to create a roadmap to achieve them. And last is there are several colleges now that have started taking up GRE as an option. So if you're more comfortable with that and would like to explore that, I suggest giving that a shot as well. Now, having said all of that, a low GMAT is not a deal breaker. It's just one of the factors. Is it a key factor? Yes, but a lot of other elements play into your application. So the other two are essentially the essays, references, and profile. Now, if you do have a low GMAT or you believe you cannot cross a certain threshold, you can invest more time in actually distinguishing yourself, understanding what the typical candidate profile is, and ensuring that your story does stick out. Now, finally, coming to achieving all of this, because I think it's on two levels, and the goal setting would be very clear. First is outline a roadmap for your essays, and understand by when you could actually accomplish the ones you'd actually be comfortable with, or essays that you'll actually be comfortable with submitting. Then attend the GRE or retake the GMAT, whichever is applicable. And finally, the goal is to always be agile to ensure that your list of dream schools to save bets are always clear, which is why you can alter the prioritization of schools if you believe you cannot achieve a certain GMAT score, or if you believe you'll exceed, rather update them to feature in the Ivy League colleges or the better colleges, so to speak. Yeah, Elena, if you could.
Wait. Can I chip in, Pranav, for one small thing?
Absolutely.
So, as Pranav was saying, I would say like only two things. He already said that the GMAT score that you need to target is not like the best GMAT score ever, but a GMAT score that won't be the reason why your application doesn't get accepted. So that's what Pranav was saying. Don't get a focus on getting like the highest ever, but good enough for it not being the deal breaker when deciding on your application. And also one other thing that I wanted to say regarding the GMAT GRE, sometimes I've found some colleagues or some friends that I've been helping, or people at work, that they were basically blocked by GMAT, and the GMAT was no longer, they tried it so many times that they couldn't even get to the scores that they were targeting. And sometimes, I mean, like the latest research that you should do is changing the exam, because you are already studying for the GMAT, and then you need to change to the GRE. But for the 3 or 4 people that I've met so far that were completely blocked on GMAT, they gave it like more than 10 tries, and they couldn't make it. They just did the GRE for 1 month or 2 months, and they could crack it just because it was different, and they were no longer blocked, and kind of like having this panic over the GMAT that sometimes some of us might be encountering. So just these two things. I don't know, Pranav, you want to comment on those, or?
No, Guillermo, I think you're on point with either point. I mean, like I said, a candidate has to be agile enough, and also understand, I mean, there are several elements to the application. They all weigh in certain amounts. And yes, they need to be agile with the approach they take. I mean, having a narrow or tunnel vision rather to this entire activity is not the best approach. So yeah, I think this is you again.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm circling back here to the overrepresented versus non-traditional backgrounds. First of all, let me here Pranav can also give a lot of insights, but here let me give you a bit of context on why I am a overrepresented background. Basically, I don't know, maybe you don't know, but Southern European consultants are kind of huge, especially in Colombia. A lot of people, a huge amount of people apply from Spain, Italy, Greece, Turkey, being from consulting. So in my case, I was kind of overrepresented when applying to the schools that I was targeting. I was targeting Columbia, I was targeting MIT. And for some reason, these 2-3 year schools that I was applying for had loads of people from the same, from McKinsey, from BCG, like similar backgrounds applying for that. So basically, I'm going to give you like small tips of what I did trying to get there. So what was useful for me and useful for some of my colleagues that right now are in those schools. So basically, as Elena was mentioning in the beginning, you need to think about your USP, your unique selling proposition, basically your value proposition. Let's say it that way. Basically, you need to think ways of making you distinguish yourself from the different profiles. So imagine, like, this is an example. I'm an Indian engineer, but my short-term goals are non-traditional industries like shipping industry. So if you have any interest in some industries that might be non-traditional for the schools that you're applying to, if you think that anything that you can do from your short-term or long-term goals could be kind of different, just leverage that, use that in your applications, because that will make that maybe your background is similar, but what you're aiming for is completely different. So you are not another Southern European consultant that is going to come back to consulting afterwards, but you want to do in your long-term different industry. That imagine that you're going to Colombia. Colombia has big financial services. So lots of people are going to be applying to Colombia for financial services. But in your case, you love energy and you want to do some climate finance or some climate tech. So those kind of things are the things that might be able to distinguish yourself. So it's kind of a trade-off between what you need on your what your school is good at, and also what you want to do. So it's not like you need to choose the industry that your school doesn't do, because that maybe not work. If you want to do an industry that in your target school is not going to be is not big enough, then it's going to be a bit difficult for the application. But trying to leverage the expertise from the school, from your perspectives on the short term. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense. I can ask you a bit more questions, follow up if you have any other questions on that. But that's basically that's it. Takes to the second point. No, adapting and tailoring your USP to each of your target schools. You need to know about the personalities of the schools and then go for it. So Stanford, as the example, like Stanford focuses on introspection and personal development. So if your long-term goal or short-term goal is launching a startup or doing a new businesses, Stanford might be a good fit for your application. It doesn't mean that you cannot use that in the rest of the schools, but then that is kind of like where Stanford is good at or big at. So that's it. And also try to leverage every non-traditional aspect of your background, not only your goals or your future, but all the things that you've done in the past. If your school where you studied was different, anything in your professional life that might seem not really important. You did an internship somewhere, maybe using that could make yourself different from the rest and help you make a winning application. I don't know, Pranav, you have anything else to add here, or?
Yeah, in this case, I think I followed something similar to what GMO is highlighting, because essentially I took the second one. So I'm essentially an Indian engineer, and I was a consultant going into consulting. So essentially what I did was try to better understand what INSEAD's all about, and what INSEAD is, essentially how I could best associate myself with, one, the identity, and two, what's offered in the college. I think the depth of research. So I think it's not only what you are, I mean, what your experience is, but also your approach towards understanding the school. I mean, you have them complement together and sort of tie it back together and demonstrate the clarity that you have in those applications. At least that's the approach I took. And yeah, that's what worked for me in the end.
Thank you. So I don't know if you can go to the next one. Okay. So now we have 2 slides more process. Okay, maybe I don't kind of see the left. Okay, okay, it's fine. Then we'll go with the slide as it is. So we have 2 slides of more process of the action plan, Processly MBA plan that we're thinking of. So here basically it's the 5 steps that you can do to build a unique unique MBA application. So basically it's 5, as you can see, like, so you can cut it. The thing is like, so you can make it here. Let me do again, mentioning what I was mentioning. You know, that don't focus too much maybe on one of the dimensions. So I want to get 740 on the GMAT because maybe 680 is good enough, and it's not going to be the cut. This 680 is not going to be the cut. You can just basically go with all the dimensions, and so that you can cut it in all of these. So kind of think of, if you were evaluating your application, if you were to evaluate one of the dimensions each time, would it be able to cut it, and then compounding them, that would be the final goal. Okay. Then I think this also links with what we were saying before, soul search and deep research. Okay, so basically doing a deep research over all the schools that we want, doing this, like what Pranav was saying, the deep thing, like knowing all the stuff, trying to get to know the clubs, the small things that the schools that might not ever, that you might not find on the internet. So basically talking with people that have been there or are currently there. Don't be afraid to reach people via LinkedIn. I personally, when I received questions about the MBA, I'm super happy to answer them, and I think that I speak for most of the MBA candidates when I say that probably they will all be super happy answering you, and classes are big enough. So if someone doesn't answer, then you can also go to the next one and try your luck with 5 or 6 people. I'm 100% sure that at least one will be answering your questions. Then the third step is also the crafting your career, as I was mentioning, the short-term, long-term goals that might be aligned with your applications. Then the fourth step is the preview recommendations, preview recommenders and recommendations. We haven't talked about this, but well, I guess that we all know that the applications always come with at least one recommendation letter. So basically prepping your recommenders with telling them your story, how you are framing your application, so that they know how to frame their recommendation stories as well, and then basically telling your story authentically. With these 5 steps, you should be able to do, as I was mentioning, like a comprehensive application. And you might think that what you have to think about is that all the things that you do in your applications, even if it's 1 essay, even if it's 3 essays, with your recommendation letters, with all the things that you are, when you fill in the application, need to tell a compelling story overall. So if you have 3 essays, 1 essay has to tell one part of the story, the second one has to tell another part, and then the third one kind of round up everything. And then your 2 recommendation letters, or the recommendation letter, need to underline the things that you are also mentioning there. I don't know if this makes sense for you, but basically it's building since the beginning, like your whole application needs to be linked among the different essays and things that you're doing to be able to build this unique MBA application.
Yeah, I would just like to chip in here a bit. So just to one question rather I've got from folks I've consulted is, how do we commit to one career path, or like we are confused, or we have so many other elements that we would like to highlight? Look, the goal is to understand what's, like, if today you was meant to choose a career, what would be your first choice, right? And which would best fit your long-term goals. You have to demonstrate that you can prioritize. You have to demonstrate that, yes, you're willing to commit to one particular path, one particular channel, one particular identity about yourself, and then work with it. It cannot be very broad, essentially, because everyone's looking. Then you work with that hypothesis. Eventually, if it's proved wrong, then of course you test it out and then try another career path. But always don't shy away from committing, as long as it's justified and fits into your story. I guess that's it from my end. Elena, if you want to move to the next slide.
So, and then this second slide, as I was mentioning, a bit like processy, load of process. So this is kind of like a action plan, thinking on deadlines for round 2, okay, thinking in January. Be mindful that this would be best practice roadmap. I know that we are already in November. If you are thinking right now on starting an application, you are obviously a bit late, but you can still make it. The thing is, basically, you will need to take all this roadmap and squeeze it in 2 months. It's not going to be an easy path. You're going to be working long hours on the applications, but you still can make it. But let's go for the optimal roadmap to be with time, no rush, and be able to get to application. Okay, so basically we'll be in T-4 months. Let's say that way would be mostly September. You kind of should be deciding the business schools. Well, first of all, decide if the business school is for you, no? And then study, retake all the GMAT, GRE kind of things that you need to do. If you don't get it in the first time, you might need to be doing it in October, November. That's normal. It's not the most weird thing to be doing the application or preparing the application without the GMAT score, the final GMAT score with you, or at least maybe not your target score, but a good score, and you keep on trying to improve that, okay? Then select the schools, and it would be get a consultant in case you're working with MBA Beyond, in this case, which you would get in a consultant that you will be working with us, okay? So basically, during October, you are doing this self-discovery path, the career game plan and school research. This is basically what we're doing, all the research, the deep stuff that you need to know from the schools, from yourself, to be ready to build a compelling story would be during like T-3 months, let's say that way. Like for during a month, you will be doing kind of like this self-discovery path or introspective way of thinking about yourself, your career, your goals, that will make you, or at least help you, making a compelling application. In T- month, you will be already selecting your recommenders, writing the essays, and finalizing your resume. And that will take all this time, probably 2 months or even more, doing them, just circling around the essays, the resume, all the recommendation letters, checking that everything matches perfectly, that, as we were mentioning, the attention to detail is really important, especially in round 2, as we're going to these less spots available. And that's basically all. And it will be in January, you just like submit the application, and in your case, you just forget about it for a few weeks and start the interview prep once you hear from the schools. So this will be, again, let me highlight this again. This will be the perfect roadmap. I know that normally roadmaps with 4 months never work. You're still on time, but if you decide to start now and you're still in the September ways of doing things, you probably will be a kind of a stretch in terms of timing. So hopefully you can make it, but be mindful that would be kind of a rush, and you will be squeezing a lot of work in just 2 months. So yes, I think Ken and I, we can go to the next one, or maybe I don't know if you want to. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Guillermo. Thanks, Elena. So I think finally it comes down to shortlisting the best fit schools for you. Like I mentioned, you work from your dream schools to your safe bets. I think the first question is, I think, why an MBA, right? The question is, what is the reason for this? Because we all know it's a big investment of money and time, and takes a toll on you. Guillermo would probably agree to that as well. But it all boils down to what your personal and professional goals are. Are they change in role, industry region, career acceleration? Introspect, do the soul searching and research that Guillermo mentioned about earlier, and find out why exactly do you want to do an MBA. Then it's all about putting in the work. First, start with the rankings list, like we spoke about earlier. Do an in-depth research of the schools. I would suggest start with the school websites. That's usually a marketing tool for all colleges. So they try to put out as much of information as possible about the school. Stay current to what's listed out there, and identify what happens in class, what's the kind of pedagogy, what are the out-of-class activities, and critically, if you have certain professional goals, understand if they are a feeder for those specific organizations or sector. Next is understand the application school requirements. They are varied. They could be right from tuition to essays, GMAT, and deadlines, which will be critical given you round 2, and also candidate profile. All of these are available. There are resources, and if, of course, you're working with one of us, like with MBA Beyond, we do have all of this information. We can definitely help you out with those. And this, speaking to alums and attending school events, I think this is really, really important. And I think, like Guillermo said, don't be shy. Put yourself out there. I think all alums are open to speaking to people. Put yourself out there, drop those messages on LinkedIn, and please write a message in there. It's the odds of you getting accepted and actually an alum making time are higher, of course, if you write a message saying, yes, this is why you want to reach out to them, rather than just dropping an invite. And of course, I've spoken to a few. So while, yes, we are all happy to give the time, I suggest doing that bit of research before actually coming to talk, because I actually had once someone just tell me bluntly during my INSEAD days that, why did you choose a 1-year MBA over a 2-year MBA? Explain. I mean, that's it. That was the question. And it reeked of just being picked off the internet. I would have loved for the question to be a little more tailored. So do your research and come there, because essentially they are making time for you as well. So you want to respect the time. And lastly is be realistic. I suggest outlining your limitations. And a lot of times we are not introspected enough to identify our failures or limitations. So I suggest utilizing people around you, or your consultants rather, as sounding boards to better understand what your limitations could be, what your true preferences are, and utilize those towards shortlisting or rather altering the list of your best fit schools. And I think, and voila, you basically have your dream to save that.
Okay, thank you both so much for sharing again your insights and your knowledge into the process. I think it's just really valuable. You both have different experiences, different backgrounds, and yet you both are, I know, very dedicated to the process of the MBA, of MBA admissions in a way that I think really encourages candidates to be insightful, to be introspective, and to be authentic. And so thank you both again. And don't worry, we do have questions, so don't go anywhere, guys. So just a little bit about our process. So for those of you, I think a few of you have already talked to me and possibly had your profile evaluated, have heard a little bit about our process, but I want to share a little bit more because I think it emphasizes what Guillermo and Pranav have talked about in terms of preparation for MBA admissions. So when you work with MBA and Beyond, the content gathering phase is what I would call our differentiator. It's our USP. The content gathering phase is an in-depth part of the MBA admissions process. So we don't just jump into working on essays and your shortlisting of schools and things like that. What's important to us is hearing your journey. It's hearing your goals and understanding, kind of your professional experiences, your personal experiences, and how they have led to this point where you are now applying for an MBA. So in the content gathering phase, we do everything from a personality assessment to having you speak with our content specialist who has a background in psychology and can create, a safe space for each candidate to kind of be their truest selves, be their authentic selves, to really dig into their strengths, their motivators, their needs, interests, and again, talk about how times of opportunity and times of growth have, kind of motivated them towards pursuing an MBA and how it has impacted their journey thus far and how it has influenced their, plan beyond the MBA, whether that's a kind of short-term goal like the next year or two or a 10-year goal. We want to find those things out. We also are going to be asking you to share, a personal contact, a professional contact, and possibly even a third person, personal or professional, to gain more insight into who you are as a person. We would ask them questions about you, about their experiences with you, about your character. And that's to provide a more holistic view of who you are as a person, not just who you are as an MBA candidate, but who you are as a person. And that is to help candidates, address biases, to potentially figure out where they're underselling or potentially overselling themselves, as we all tend to do in certain areas, because we're not often asked to talk about ourselves in these kinds of ways. So usually this is one of the first times that many candidates or people in general have been asked to really, again, take some time to be introspective, to have that self-awareness, to look at their journey and be able to talk about it, present it in a process that's a little bit stressful at times or a lot stressful at times. So the content gathering phase, it's normal for candidates to spend 2 to 3 weeks working with our content specialist and their primary consultant on gathering all this content and on going through it. And that is what eventually is going to inform your essays, your letters of recommendation, your resume, your interviews. I think both Guillermo and Pranav have talked about the value of both authenticity and consistency across an application. So that is extremely important when you think about how many applications these admissions committees are reading. They're people, so they have only a certain bandwidth to really process information. And if you're, putting in a lot of great things about yourself, but they're not really consistent across the board, it's really hard for them to visualize you as a whole person that they can see on their campus. Sometimes you give them too much information. Other times you don't give them enough and they're not able to connect with you, because these are human beings on the other side of the screen, on the other side of the application. So they are looking for opportunities to connect with candidates. And again, if you can give them that introspective side of yourself, if you can be insightful, if you can speak to your authentic experiences, there is likely something that they are going to connect with, and connect with their own school's culture and say, yes, I can see this candidate on our campus. I can see them benefiting from this program because I can visualize who they are as a person. So it informs a lot of other pieces of your application, and it prevents you from kind of starting from scratch each time. That is a tendency of candidates who kind of approach this without a plan, and they'll start from scratch each time they're trying to work on an essay for a particular school. They'll try to tailor it too much to the school instead of finding that balance between what is the school looking for versus what am I looking for in a consistent and authentic way. And again, your branding is ultimately what that becomes. It's your brand for both a global MBA, but also for beyond the MBA admissions process. When you're done with your MBA, we want you to be able to look back on this process, to look back on what you've learned about yourself and use that for future goals, for careers, for your career beyond the MBA program. And that's why we spend, again, an intentional part of the process on that content gathering, allowing it to inform the essays and the resumes, but also hoping that you'll take that and take it with you into the MBA program and beyond. So again, that's just a little bit of our process. If you have more questions about that, you're always welcome to either put them in the chat box or email us. We'll also be more than happy, again, to just email you with details. And for those of you who are considering working with MBA and Beyond, we do have an opportunity for you to submit some questions with the potential of being selected for being one of 3 candidates, because we do have a limited number of candidates that our consultants work with. And we are wanting to choose 3 candidates to receive up to 20% discount on our comprehensive packages, which would include everything I just talked about for our process, guidance and mentorship on all parts of it. But you would need to answer these questions, the 3 schools and rounds you're applying to and why, and then what you think your USPs are, what your differentiators are. And again, this is to, 1, get you started thinking about these kinds of things, because these topics are going to be what's important in your applications. And then also it helps us get to know you better, helps us understand your profile a little bit more. If you have already done a profile evaluation and maybe you want a little help with these questions, you're welcome to reach out to your profile evaluator. For those of you who spoke with me, you're welcome to reach out to me. But those of you who have not done a profile evaluation, they are free and you're welcome to sign up for one. I think somebody will probably put it in the chat box. But the consultants you would be working with, again, they're like Pranav, they're Guillermo, they're experienced, they're insightful. They are candidates to top MBA schools. They understand exactly what you're going through and can really, again, guide you and be that both teammate and mentor to keep you less stressed through the process, and because you don't know what you don't know. And that's why we want you to feel comfortable when you're working with a consultant. So you are welcome to ask questions and feel comfortable, asking questions and getting clarity on every part of the process. So I'm gonna go to questions in the chat now. We've had several, so I'm gonna kind of start towards the top. And Guillermo and Pranav, I would really appreciate your insight into these questions. So I think the first question is from Terrence. Are acceptance rates better in round 1 or round 2? Considering that round 2 has more applications, Pranav or Guillermo, you're welcome to tackle this particular question if you'd like.
Yep. So I can go, but yeah, considering there have more applications and normally less spots saved for round 2, acceptance rates are lower, but these answers are going to always have a caveat. It's a yes, but depends a lot on your profile. So if you are coming from consulting or banking, or more like, let's say, this kind of backgrounds, round 2 is more difficult than round 1. Also because in round 1 they're basically like filling spots, and they have, like, let's say, imagine that we have a class for 300 people and they have 30 spots for consultants and investment bankers, because otherwise you would have so many investment bankers and consultants that the class would be no diverse at all, and they will fill out of the 30 spots maybe 20 of the consultants and investment bankers. So round 2, it's going to be more difficult for you. If you have a non-traditional background, completely different, then round 2 shouldn't be a problem. And obviously, if you round up well your application, it should not affect at all. But overall, application rates are lower in round 2 because they have more people and fewer. I would say that it's not super smaller spots, but fewer spots normally than in round 1. Sorry. That's all the information that I can give you for what I've experienced so far. I don't know if you.
Yeah, Guillermo, I've had a similar experience. Round 2 tends to be tricky. I think a lot of people the same people who didn't apply in round 1, essentially believing their applications weren't mature enough, apply in round 2, right? Apart from the ones who already decided to apply in round 2. Or you have these slew of people who face rejections from their dream schools, which could be HBS, and then they flood round 2 applications into different colleges. So yes, there are going to be a bunch of people who are already aiming high, and that results in the low acceptance rates for round 2, essentially. But that doesn't mean you need to be discouraged. I think you need to understand how you can best stand out. I think we've spoken about that extensively. How do you create your identity and make your pitch through your essays? And there's no stopping you from actually getting that interview invite and converting that later.
Yeah, and just to build off just a little bit of both of those answers, I think it's important to remember that you never know what a MBA program is looking for, what the AdComs are looking for. You could have a particular differentiator USP that is what they are looking for. And therefore, in round 2 or later rounds, you might actually be checking a box for the college. So don't necessarily assume that every part of your profile is, overrepresented or anything like that. Again, you could have something that they are specifically wanting and that maybe didn't get really filled in round 1. So just something to keep in mind. Another question was, and Guillermo, they kind of specifically had tagged you a little bit in this. I am specifically interested in the Columbia MBA MS program. Do you think you can suggest a GMAT target score? I know the GMAT score is not the only factor, but I would like to safeguard that factor with others in my application.
Okay, tough question. Truth to be told, there is no way of safeguarding your GMAT. You can have up to a 780 and not get in, and you can get even a 550 and then get in. There's no perfect answer for that. I was just like checking when I saw the question. I think it was Dawal who lent the question. I was just going to the Columbia published class of 2022, the GMAT score range, the GMAT score in 80%. So I don't want to give you a number. I can give you a number. I would tell you, like, just follow the 80% range and just take the lower range as the, let's say, a way to start, which in this case, if you go to the page, would be like a 700. But again, as you can see, the range, it ranges from 550 to 780. That's why the two numbers that I said. And there's people that have gotten in with a 550 and with a 780. So here it's basically a trade-off. You might have a lower GMAT score, but then, as we were mentioning, you have a compelling story and you check or tick the box, which what they are looking for, and then you get in, and you might have the best GMAT score, but then you grow confident and you don't do the application as you should do it. You don't build a compelling story. You don't have anything to bring into the school. So yes, if you want to make sure that you get in with a GMAT score, I would say just focus on the 80% range, lower range of the school entrance, but that doesn't give you either security of getting in, or you shouldn't be neither confident or discouraged by your score when you are applying. Just focus on trying to do a trade-off, and you have a bigger, higher GMAT score, you can maybe be a bit less through with your application in some parts, but I would say that yes, focus on the 80%, as I said, and go for it. But again, don't be excessively confident if you get a high GMAT score, and don't be scared of having a lower than maybe the range that we are talking about.
I think that answers it really well. And again, I think you spoke to this, one of y'all spoke to this a little bit earlier in the presentation when you said, really, you're just focusing on a GMAT that doesn't, that doesn't work against you, so to speak. That isn't going to be the reason. But again, it's a GMAT score is rarely, if ever, the reason you get into a program, right? So I think, yeah, focusing kind of on that, like you said, that middle range, that kind of target in there, that's for the best. But ultimately, you're going to get the score you prepare for. And, when it comes down to it, they really are looking at a holistic, comprehensive view of your entire application. And you can do a lot when it comes to emphasizing, again, your USPs, your differentiators in your interview, in your resume, and your essays, and if you can show that you're a good match for the school in terms of, what you bring to the table versus what you're needing from the program, that can outweigh things like a GPA or a GMAT score. In a sense, they do want to know you can handle the academic parts, but beyond that, they're looking for, are you going to be a good product of the program at the end of it? Okay, so I'm not sure if we have, I think we had other questions that they were able to get answered. Some were about lower GPAs, how are those impacted? So for anyone that was wondering, if you do have a lower GPA, yes, that can be, it's not ignored, but it can be, oh, I'm sorry, the word has escaped me, but you can have an application, essays, work experience, et cetera, that can compensate. There you go, compensate for a lower GPA. Fravan, Guillermo, would you agree with that? Or
yeah, I'm personally I'm a case wherein I had an extremely low GPA. I think if I use my university guidelines, it converts to 2 out of 4. So that's significantly low, and I made my way to INSEAD. So I think, yes, it's a factor, but there are several other elements that play in. So focus on them, and I think you'll see it through.
excellent.
Yeah,
And then
I agree.
sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the same. I had like a lower GPA compared to the US standards. I think that maybe it's because I'm from a non-US country, so my GPA is different perceived here or whatever. But you can always check as well, as I was mentioning with the GMAT scores. You can check the range of GPAs. All schools normally published the lowest, the highest GPA that they got accepted in, and so you can get also a sense of how important each school weighs those GPAs and those targets.
Excellent. And someone else had asked about if they have many years work experience, like 9 years or so, and are they, how does that impact kind of admissions? How does that impact their chances of getting into schools? Are they going to be looked, frowned upon? Is it seen as a negative that they have that many years? I think to that, I would say, and I think this was answered in the chat as well, if you do have that many years experience and you're not going for something like an executive, then you do need to be very specific and have a very clear answer on why it's been 9 years and why you are now going for an MBA. Because you do have a lot to speak to. You are going to have to be very intentional about what you're pulling from those 9 years of experience to put forth in your essays, because again, it's going to be a lot of information for the adcoms to take in. And you are going to have to show, why the MBA is now the next step that makes sense. That's going to get you towards your goals that 9 years of experience didn't. And so, why you're needing that MBA now. I don't know if either of you have colleagues or anyone who's done that, but that would be my take on that. And then someone just asked, what about the reverse, a strong GPA in grad school, but they don't manage a strong GMAT score?
As we were mentioning, trade-offs. These are trade-offs. Maybe a stronger GPA and lower GMAT, then it works. It might work if the rest of your application is well balanced. Then it should work in theory. And also, again, it depends a lot in a lot of things. If you're telling me that you have a strong GPA on engineering, then maybe your GMAT is not strong on quant, but is strong on verbal. Then they might say, okay, so this person did not super well on the quant or the GMAT, but it has a really strong GPA on undergrad and it's an engineer. So math is not going to be a problem and has a good verbal. So it's ticking the box. So it's just trade-offs. Always okay, not engineering in your case, but yeah, that it's just an example. The thing is that you need to do a trade-off and balance with your application. You have a strong GPA, then it might allow you to do a lower GMAT score than maybe average, but provided that the rest of the application is well-rounded and perfectly done.
And I would also say that, again, there are a lot of candidates I talk to that have done both the GMAT and the GRE and have found that they test better on the GRE. So that's an option to explore. Or if you're just not a strong test taker, some people aren't, they have the strong GPA, which shows they can handle the academics. Maybe they have diagnosed test anxiety or things like that. That is why, some schools, not all, but some offer GMAT waivers, and you can apply for those early on. That's something we have helped many candidates with, is applying for GMAT waivers, writing those letters, etc. So again, it depends on why your GMAT score maybe isn't as high as you would like it to be, but often you can provide some sort of context for it. Ultimately, again, the school is just wanting to know, can you handle the academics? So I want to be respectful of time. And so we're coming to a close. I do know that some people are putting in a few more questions, but you are welcome to email those questions at whoever you got the invite from. Email them those questions. We will get you the answers. We're happy to do that. We're also happy to do the profile evaluations. Again, both Pravan and Guillermo are consultants. So if you've really connected with one of them and you can see them being a good fit for you to help, you're welcome to, also include that in a request, and we can see if that would be a good match. But thank you to everyone who attended. Don't forget, if you would like to answer those questions that we put up on the presentation to see about receiving discounts on packages, have those submitted by November 20th. We will be emailing a recording of this presentation to everyone, and it will include those questions, so you'll be able to review everything. And Guillermo, Pranav, thank you so much for presenting. Thank you so much for your insights and your knowledge in this. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now. And if you guys have any last things you'd like to say, or.
Essentially, I mean, yes, we spoke a lot about how round two can be difficult. I think don't be discouraged at the end of the day. It's about you introspecting enough, sort of highlighting, understanding what's your true profile, true identity, and putting it out there to ensure it complements with what the school stands for, and essentially just converting it at the end of the day. And I think Elena I give a pretty detailed explanation of how we could help you do that. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you all for joining, and hope that you all apply, and hope that you all get in, and just remember, the basic thing is trade-offs on your applications and get a good balance. That would be my last thing to say.
I think so. Trade-offs, USPs, and stay encouraged, stay motivated. I think that was what we're taking from this.
Yeah,
all right.
definitely.
Again, thank you all. And I hope you have a good rest of your day or evening, wherever you are in the world. And yeah, we hope to be talking to all of you soon. All right. Bye.